Good morning. I assume everyone here has heard the phrase, nobody's perfect. And we know that is an essential truth when you're speaking of humanity, correct? We understand that none of us are perfect. We can't get it right. And yet, many of us really hurt ourselves trying. Strive for perfection. And we're supposed to an extent. The idea behind that saying that nobody's perfect is sometimes used by the world, by the enemies of God, to try to paint a picture of a cruel, thoughtless, careless, and probably somewhat incompetent God. And the reason I say incompetent is because if you expect something that cannot happen, you're not being too bright about it. You're not very good at what you're doing if you think something that is impossible is going to happen, because if none of us can be perfect and God set the standard at perfection, well, that's kind of rude. I mean, if everybody here had to be able to stand flat-footed and touch the ceiling before any of us could leave, we would all starve to death. If you set the standard too high for anybody to get to, then nobody can make it. So doesn't that mean God doesn't really care? Doesn't that mean that God is cruel or foolish? But we see this like, I'm going to set up a event or a business or whatever, and so this is how I want things to go, so I'm going to make the rules, and we act like God did that. Well, I'm going to make the standard this, but then I am going to create them where they can't do the standard, so let them twist on that. And that's how the world sees God sometimes. But it's not that he arbitrarily set a standard that we couldn't meet. It's that the standard is not some idealized goal. The standard is as sure and as necessary as the laws of physics. Without physics being set up the way it is, without aerodynamics working just the way they do, without gravity working just the way it does, airplanes couldn't fly. Your car wouldn't go, and you wouldn't be able to walk across the yard very well. It's set the way it is for a reason. And because there is a thing of gravity, if you don't have a parachute and you fall off a building that is 900 feet high, you're going to die. And it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how streamlined you can make your body or how catch all the air you can and try to slow yourself down that you try to do. There is a thing called terminal velocity. It'll kill you. That's just physics. There is a gap between us and God, a gap between us and life that we can't cross. It's just like falling 1,000 feet. And it's not that God made some standard that is cruel. It's just that he is perfect and he is holy. He's the only one that could do that. So we don't have a cruel God. We don't have a mean God. We don't have a foolish God. We don't have a God that set things up so that nobody could have life. We have a God that wrapped himself in flesh and jumped off the building so you don't have to. And he dropped the full weight that gravity demands. But he hadn't done what made him subject. He had not sinned, and he did not deserve his death. And so he defeated death and had victory over the grave, and he lives. Now, a cruel God, that the world wants to say God is cruel because of this standard, a cruel God would have said, see, that's how you do it. It's not that hard. Love everybody. Stop being selfish. Be kind. I mean, essentially, that's it. That's all you got to do. That would be cruel. But instead, he forfeited his prize and gave it to us in exchange for our punishment. So essentially, he jumped without a parachute and gave everybody who wanted one to shoot so we could all hit the ground safely. He made a way. And it's a way so free to the people who need a way, and so simple that even a child can understand it, that it is available to anyone and everyone who will just say, yeah, I'd like a chute. Falling 1,000 feet doesn't sound like fun. Yes, Lord, I appreciate the chute. I'd rather not jump. I'd rather not fall at all. But I'll take the parachute, thank you. The grace of God made a way. He made a way that can't be taken away. He made a way you don't have to earn, so it takes your standard right out of it. Your standard no longer applies. You don't have to live up to the standard. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to make it. It's all on him. It's not cruel. It's absolute, amazing love. Absolute, amazing love. So loving God said, I know they can't make the standard, so I'll make it where they won't have to. See, everybody who wants to act like it shouldn't have a standard, we all have a standard. We're innately born with it, you know. Okay, everybody should be free to be themselves and just try to be good. Well, trying to be good is a standard. Who defines good? What's good enough? That can get confusing real fast, you know. Most people, the standard is really, really low. Well, I ain't as bad as Hitler. Really? That's your gold star? Okay. We don't even live up to our heroes, you know. Oh, well, I'm almost as good as Mother Teresa. Well, she's nowhere near as close as good as Jesus, so you're in trouble. No. The standard is perfection, not because God is mean, but because we need to understand that we can't meet the standard. Because if we thought we could do it, we wouldn't realize we need him. And he's the only way to get life. So he wants to make it real clear that you can't do it so that you'll let him. And that's love. That's love. Because he loves us as we are, not as we should be, but he loves us enough not to leave us as we are. So he wrapped himself in flesh. He did what we were always supposed to do and never could. Do it right. Do it for the right reasons. Perfect all the time. I've already blown perfection today. And if you think you haven't, you've blown it at least twice, because you blew it when you blew it and you really stink at self-evaluation. But Jesus did it right. And he gave us his prize. And he died on that cross. And he rose from that grave. And he lives today. And the Holy Spirit lives within us because of what Jesus did on that cross to give us the power to fly or breathe underwater or live without sin or whatever crazy standard of perfection works for you. He's the only way we can do it because it's God doing in us what God demands of us because none of us can do it ourselves. So I don't think it's cruel to say, in order to be a part of this club, you have to pay $1 million. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to give everybody $1 million who wants to be a part of this club. That's not cruel. And it doesn't matter that the standard is perfection if he will make us perfect. And he will. He will complete the work that he began. So let's remember the one who does the work and thank him for doing the work. And remember that we can boldly come to the throne of grace to get what we need to do what we can't do. Because he humbly died in our place.